We have a great foundation, I would say. So like, to me, I think that's just going to continue to mature in terms of like the meaningful impact that the space has created in like the greater art world so quickly. So I think that will continue to kind of come up on its own. And then beyond that, I think there's still a lot to try that hasn't been tried before. Like, I think that there's going to be a lot of evolution in generative art specifically because there's new technologies all the time. So there's always going to be that next thing, and it's probably going to have more capabilities than at least what I'm familiar with, and that's okay. But for me, like, I don't think we've even really reached like the limit at all whatsoever with what you can just do with JavaScript. I think it's going to kind of continue to grow, and there will be those divergences where new technologies come in, but there's going to be people doing really kick-ass awesome things with the existing tools we have already. And maybe they're going to do things that look like what we're doing now with new tools. Who knows what's going to be, but I'm sure it'll come. So.
All right, episode 4. Just had a great conversation with James Merrill. James is a good friend of mine, but more importantly, he is a super talented long-form generative artist in our space. We had a great conversation. It's always a pleasure talking with James. He's a super interesting guy. We talked about his artistic journey, how he fell into the long-form on-chain generative art space. We talked about Marfa, Texas, of which we are both going to be attending, which is happening next week for the annual ArtBlocks weekend meetup. Super pumped for that. And we talked about a bunch of things. So give it a listen. I think it's really interesting. Big fan of James, of course. And yeah, I think you'll enjoy, hopefully. So give it a listen. Before we jump in, none of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment and information purposes only. Please take everything with a grain of salt and do your own research. More information can be found in the podcast episode description below. All right, now let's get into it. All right, so James Merrill, it's great to see you, man. Thanks for making time to come on the podcast. How's everything going on your end these days?
Thanks, man. I'm super excited to be here. Everything's going pretty good, man. Just settling into a lot of changes after the launch of Busy earlier this year. I'm trying to figure out like what's next.
Just as a kind of initial starting question here, what's the backstory behind Lost Pixels? Because it's something that I'm not really too sure about, and I see that like on your website, on your Twitter handle, is Into the Pixel, I think it is. So. What's the backstory there?
I think I actually might be like an Xbox gamer tag. Like I don't want to out myself here, but it has been quite a while since I've played like Halo. So I think it really it's interesting. I think as a professional artist, defining your identity when you're kind of like your career was born digitally, because for me at least, everything was just meshed together for the longest time. So like. You know, playing Xbox, having a digital art presence online, establishing a business, all these things kind of happened earlier on in my career. And it wasn't super intentional the way it played out. It's more just like kind of by happenstance, some of these naming conventions that I have. And especially because, you know, like with Twitter and with Instagram, like once you kind of set your name, it's like you don't really want to change it. And also, like I tried to change it, and I actually tried to unify using the same name on Instagram and X, but there's some game developer named Lost Pixels on Twitter that hasn't been active for like 10 plus years. So I tried to report that dude and get the name. It just wasn't working out. So long story short, it's not like it's super intentional. I tend to just try to go by my name now, James Merrill, but there's like a legacy of this other world of me that you can actually like trace back the lineage of like the stuff I've been doing from quite a while and see I've like changed it a couple times. But yeah, it's not like there's something specific there. I think what does it actually mean to be like a lost pixel? Like I love the idea of kind of playing around with like the precision and refinement of computation. So thinking about it kind of like as the smallest possible form and a single pixel and the position of that pixel and whether it's orderly or chaotic, whether it's found or lost. That's kind of where my mind was at.
I think there's a lot worse Xbox names that you could have probably chosen, so thankfully this is the one that stuck. I guess the name then originates from a long time ago, and I know that becoming a digital artist, like it's been I believe over 20 years for you since you started to create digital art. So I'm curious if you can kind of maybe just take us back to kind of how things began.
I mean, it's actually been since around 2004. That's when I really started practicing like creating things digitally, creating things in different ways than I do now. But I got really inspired by a couple of websites when I first kind of like I'd been on the internet since like I was a little kid, but I didn't know that you could create things until I really discovered newgrounds.com, which is a really old website that people would post like flash animations in games to. And I just got like so fascinated by the idea that I didn't have to buy games. I could just go on the internet and play them. And people would make like music videos and stories. And it was just like one of those times on the internet where there's a lot of creative people all kind of in a community together. And there was like, you know, a message board, there was like comments, there was kind of like a feed, all these things that like I think continuously draw me into these communities. Like they were present there. And that was like really inspiring to kind of just be like, dude, how are people making this? Like, I want to make this. So I knew about Flash, but you know, it was at that time quite expensive to acquire the software. I was probably around like 13 or 14, and a little bit younger. And there's like just like no chance that I could mow lawns enough to afford like a $600 piece of software or whatever it was. So my mom is a huge like thrifter and loved going to New York City. So we would go on these like treks up there from Maryland, which is where I'm from, and you know, she would spend like all day basically trying to find the best deals on the cheapest shit she could ever find. And I think I have a little bit of that in me. So we were like walking around in New York, and we walked by some like street vendor, and he had a bunch of books on top of like a fold out table. And one of them had the Flash logo on it. And I walked up and I was like, whoa, cool, Flash. Like, I know all about this from Newgrounds. So started flipping through it a little bit. And he was like, hey, do you want to buy that software? And I was like, yeah, definitely. So basically under the table, he had this like bin of basically like hundreds of illegal pieces of software like on CDs that he burned. And he like pulled it out and put it on top. And he pulled out Flash. It was actually the whole like Macromedia suite. And he was like, I'll sell it to you for 20 bucks. And I was like, sold. So I acquired Flash originally, and that was like basically the breakthrough moment because I took it home, I put it on my computer, and then I opened it up and just started like kind of learning it without really any sort of formal guidance or education, just being like, what do these tools do? Like, how do they work? And it was interesting because I feel like it was really intuitive. I was able to kind of understand like how there was a timeline, how you can make animations with vector graphics, and you know, I started posting on Newgrounds. And then after I did that for a little while, I was like, I need a website. So like, how do you build a website? It used to be way different and way harder. Like, especially for someone who like didn't have, again, any formal education. It's like, you basically pay some hosting company, you get like SFTP logins, like what the hell's that? What software do you need to do that? But after a while, I figured out how to like upload my file to this remote place. You could go to it once I bought a domain. That might have been where some of these funny names came from originally. But I published my first website. And I tell you this because one of the key parts about making a website is you have to know at least some little bit of coding. So Flash was beautiful because it really was nestled in like this interesting space of being a vector graphics software with a kind of a programming side to it. So it had this thing called ActionScript, which looks a lot like JavaScript, that you could write and then like make it do stuff. And you could use code to make it do sorts of really interesting things. So if you wanted buttons to do things, maybe play sound effects or make animations, you could do all that with code. So like I started to learn how to code through Flash. And I remember some of like the really stupid mistakes I made when I was learning, where like my first website, I think I had like 100 of these little blocks and I wanted them to like animate around as you clicked the different sections. So I would like take a piece of paper and write down the X and Y coordinates of every single block. And then like when you clicked the button, I would like write down another, like, and then I would just like write like hundreds of lines of code to be like, make this block go to that position. And then it like dawned on me later on that a for statement would have made that like literally take 1 second. And this took me like 3 hours of like transcribing coordinates. So I basically like kept on learning through this like unintuitive way of just like wanting to make things and put them online. And then I got really into making just kind of more digital art and getting away from Flash a little bit. And at the same time, I actually got a job being a Flash developer. So like that became kind of my professional side. And then my personal side was like making digital art and just being a part of these online communities of other artists. These are some people that are still around, which is really amazing. Like back a long, long time ago, there was all these like digital abstract art groups, and I would just like fiend after being a part of them. And a lot of them were like exclusive and like curated. The funny thing is, it was all just like kids like me, basically, but it'd be like, I'm 15, you're 17, you're the leader of the group. Can I come join? And then be like, submit a specific application with your artistic biography and all these samples. And it'd be like the world's worst description of like whatever the hell I was thinking about and doing. So I got like super immersed in that, and it was super fun. And it actually, in some ways, like matured to the point where in 2011, I had an art gallery opening that I coordinated in Baltimore, and I had people come from like around the United States, and we had like a great party, great opening, that sort of thing. And then it kind of fizzled out. So that was like just one phase. I realized like over the course of this career, like nothing's really stable for long periods of time. So like there's different segments of my career, whereas like I really just did like that digital art kind of style thing for like a number of years, like pretty much like a decade. And then it kind of fizzled. And then I did a lot of like kind of short film work and 3D simulation work. And then that kind of fizzled. And then I got really into plotter art, and that's what I'm doing now. And it's like, I don't know if I'll do that forever, but right now I'm really enjoying it.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. So you've had a lot of different chapters, I guess, along your journey. It's so funny, man. I remember Newgrounds back when, probably around the same time that you were getting into it. So that's hilarious. I think that you should try to find some of those early works that you had released and mint those. I think there'd be a solid collector base for that. So then you started off with work that you were doing, the digital works with kind of this like Waveforms 1. Can you maybe like talk about that a little bit? I think that was in like what, 2016 that you released that. So if you can kind of like explain kind of like what that was, that process to kind of like develop those works, and kind of where those were kind of shown, because it seems like maybe it was later versions of this, but they've been like displayed in like I think on in Times Square, like on like one of the big screens in New York City. So what, explain kind of some of that work.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't know about this side of my career, but I kind of like after getting really immersed in like vector graphics and then even like raster graphics and doing a lot of digital painting, I incorporated a lot of 3D work into my process as well. So I have this background of like kind of haphazardly learning 3D Studio Max. Like I remember using 3D Studio Max 7 actually. It's like a billion versions ago. And it's the kind of funny thing is it hasn't changed a lot because Autodesk is like another big corporation that makes software that they don't do a good job. But anyways, um, I got really interested in the ability for computers to kind of simulate reality. I think there's like kind of post psychedelic phase in my life as well, where I was like just really intrigued by computers being able to like approximate what we see. So whether it's light and say global illumination and making things photorealistic, like I think that's so amazing that computers can like do that, that a computer can kind of approximate what happens when light shines through glass and creates caustics. Like that to me is just fascinating. And to expand upon that, what they were able to start doing is approximating fluid dynamics. And fluid dynamics are just wonderful to look at, in my opinion. So think about maybe clouds in the sky, a flowing river, waves in the ocean. Like all these things are kind of these turbulent systems that are really chaotic. And the idea that humans can reproduce that digitally is just, to me, the coolest thing ever. And there are these like equations called the Navier-Stokes equations that kind of give us the ability to create these simulations. And the really fun thing about that is they're kind of like, the proof isn't concrete, like it's still kind of theoretical. And if you can prove it is true, it's part of the Millennium Prize in mathematics. So you'll get $1 million, which is kind of dope. I'm not going to do that anytime soon, but point Point being, like, I love this idea of like mathematics, theory, beauty in nature, all kind of coalescing. And I started using software, it's like patchwork of software to create these visualizations that have kind of that characteristic of kind of turbulent space, dynamics, things kind of flowing and making it instead of being really realistic, which is what you see a lot of the time with this type of software, making it really kind of psychedelic and interesting and colorful and unreal. So taking it and finding kind of the limits of what it can do by like mashing things together that are unusual. So kind of sampling things that look a little bit like water and a little bit like smoke and having them interact or putting them into forms and then destroying them, that sort of thing. And I kind of love the results of that workflow, but I will tell you, like, the way that those were made were kind of insane. So like each little tiny scene in those videos, like each scene could be like a terabyte of fluid data. So you have to simulate what you're seeing first. So you basically set the stage by like creating forces and particles, and then you simulate that. And sometimes that'll take a couple days, and it spits out like ridiculous amounts of data. And then you take that data and you import it, and then you can like map color onto it, and then you have to render it. So like it takes so long sometimes to like make anything, because it could be like a week of just like your computer just thinking about stuff before you even see what it's going to really look like. And then you get to kind of play around with like how you're going to put a camera in that scene and what colors you're going to use and how the colors change based on maybe like the velocity of the fluids and that sort of thing. And the end result is you just get cool shit, honestly, that your computer made. And I think continuously throughout my artistic process, I like things that are kind of unwieldy, difficult. They take a long time, and it's like baking. So I like that idea of like clicking some buttons, letting it sit, and then the computer does some really difficult things, or maybe a machine does a lot of difficult things, and then coming back to the result and just kind of sitting there and appreciating it. And that was 3D simulation and rendering for me. And then, yeah, it's like that was this weird kind of time in digital art where I didn't know where my place was. So a lot of that wound up on like Vimeo under like the experimental flags, and just kind of putting it out there, and then finding a couple of other artists who did the same thing and like nestling myself within that community. And yeah, just like I never really did a lot with it. And then when, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but when NFTs first kind of became a thing, my earliest NFTs were like that work. So if you go back and look, like I saw on raster.art actually, like the earliest things on my profile are like those simulations, which is kind of cool.
I really do enjoy it. It's very different from the James Merrill long form generative artworks that I'm used to kind of seeing in more recent years, but super cool, man. And it seems like that was kind of your primary style, kind of like that theme from like up until 2018, 2019, when you started to then kind of transition into more kind of like the generative works.
Yeah, I was actually like a generative art hater for a long time because another community I was really deeply involved in was DeviantArt. So, I would be like up in the like 3D space, up in the digital art space, but I was like not cool with the generative space because every time I went there, I was like, frankly, it was very basic. Like it was really hard, I think, to make generative art back then because tooling hasn't matured at the time. And what I was looking at was never quite as in-depth as what I was seeing from 3D software, from Photoshop, from the artist's hand, that sort of thing. So to me, it was never really like my cup of tea. And it's just kind of funny to say that out loud because now it's all I think about. But the reason why I got into generative art is because I saw the power of using code to create visuals through Flash. And I thought it was interesting, especially for some like interactive purposes or from like taking real data and visualizing it in different ways. So I did some of that stuff, but really when I saw pen plotters, that's what like made me commit to learning how to do like creative coding and generative art. Like really, really, really commit to it.
So cool, man. And it's obviously kind of stuck, with you since then, eh? When I think about, code-based works that are using a plotter, I mean, you're the first person that I think of. So it's super cool to see that all these years have passed and that you're still fully immersed in that specific kind of niche within the whole long form generative space. So yeah, and I do think it is pretty an interesting transition that I guess you went through, at first wanting to kind of reject it, you could say, and then embracing it. So then you started to explore generative art and using plotters and learning about this whole kind of NFT movement that was happening, which started to really kind of like boom in like 2021. So what was that process like for you? You started off just like focusing on the plotter works, but then you started to learn, I guess, about this digital art movement that was really happening with NFTs. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can tell you the exact point actually that I found out about it all. I remember I was at work, so I was working at Burton Snowboards at the time, and I would like work on their website and pepper in all that hard work with lots of browsing like Reddit and Hacker News. And one day I was on Hacker News and someone just linked to the hashtag plotter Twitter. And I went there on Twitter and basically saw all this mind-blowing artwork that people are making with pen plotters. And this, again, I think it was like late 2018, like November 2018 is when I saw this. And what I saw when I looked at that hashtag was just like all these different artists doing different things with the same tools. And I was like, dude, there's so much happening here. This is crazy. And it's like people from around the world. And some of them are really artistic. Some of them are really mathematic. Some of them are really geometric. Others were very like free flowing and curvy. And I was just like, oh man. And I like sat on it for like a day or two and talked to my coworkers. And I was like, I'm thinking about getting one of these things called an Axie Draw. The problem is they're kind of expensive. I can't remember if it was like $550 or $700, but I was like hemming and hawing on it. And I was like, you know what I'll do? I'm gonna commit to making this machine pay for itself. If I splurge on this machine, then I'm gonna basically sell artwork that I make with it. And I was like stupid enough and had the confidence to say that I could do that without even really considering what that would take, which led me down a path of having to learn a lot really quickly. But basically, I bought the Axie Draw and it arrived at my house. I realized really quickly I didn't have a lot of space for it, so it sat on like a piece of plywood on the floor for a while. And then I just like downloaded processing and didn't know Java, and there was no LLMs or AI at the time, so just like figured it the hell out and made stuff. And processing can output to PDFs, so I was making like PDF generative artwork for a little while and then opening it in Inkscape and then sending it to the machine, and cool stuff was happening. And I really wanted to try to figure out how to like make patterns. So like one of the first things I did was like, I want to figure out how to take a bitmap and understand what's in that bitmap in terms of its grayscale values. And if I can do that, then I can make like images based on that bitmap, but make them different because I know what's in it. And I was like, and I want to use patterns to fill in these little tiny pixels. And it's like, but the patterns have to be variable because a pixel could be either black or white or somewhere in between. So like making patterns that, you know, could be really dense or really sparse based on these values, then like mapping them. And I was like, once I figured that out, I was like, oh, hell yeah, like I can do anything with this. And then I figured out like, you know, that there was some great resources online, honestly, like of different techniques that I'd never heard of, like taking rectangles and subdividing them, and then just keeping, if you just keep doing that, cool things can tend to occur. And then like, what if you take a bitmap and then you subdivide rectangles based on like the values of the bitmap? So then I was like creating like these grayscale masks that would like influence the art. And then taking that and drawing it on like watercolor paper and then watercoloring on top of it by hand. I was just like, every single day, I was just like, I just want to try something different here. And I still honestly feel that way every single day now with pen plotters. I'm like, what can I do tomorrow? And I still have like a billion experiments I want to try. That led me down that path of creative coding. And I'm really thankful that I had a couple years of being kind of like in the space before like the whole like craze of 2021 kicked off. You know, I remember I joined the Depthcore Discord. So Depthcore was one of these digital art groups that was like the first. Like I think they started in 2003, and they were always like the most prestigious for every aspiring 16-year-old wannabe artist such as myself. So like I eventually got in like 2011, and then like it all fizzled out. But there was this Discord that was set up that all the artists hung out in, and then everyone was like a professional adult, and we'd still talk in there occasionally. And this guy Justin Mahler, who is an awesome, awesome guy, who was like one of the co-founders of Depthcore, started talking about NFTs in there, and it was like February of 21. And at first, I was like watching a little bit of what was happening on Nifty Gateway, and I was just like, this is fucking like this is crazy, and I'm already too late. And it was like so funny to think about that in February of 21. But then I was like, okay, like someone gave me an invite code to get on Foundation. I was like, I'll see what happens. So I posted up some of my stuff, and like people are making like money hand over fist and all. It was like so ridiculous. And I put up something for like 1 ETH, and then this guy who was in a Christian rock band bought it, and he reached out to me, and he was like, hey, can I like video chat you to talk about your art? And I was like, whoa, like I just got paid to make digital art for like the first time really ever in a substantial way, and the collector is intrigued and wants to talk to me. Like, this shit is amazing. And I was like, wow. So I just kept on posting on there, and then I remember like not even knowing anything about like the generative side of like NFTs or Web3, and then hearing a little bit about ArtBlocks through like the plotter community. And I had been following like Tyler Hobbs for a little while because he did like sick plotter art. I mean, he still does, but he used to too, of like different things. So I was like very familiar with him through his like sneaky Reddit account and all that. And we would like talk. And he actually bought some of my really early plotter works like in 2019. So we had chatted over that, and he did Fidenza, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, like it's gonna cost a whole ETH to buy one of these? Like, fuck, I'm too late. Like, damn. But this is like the sickest thing ever. And then later in the year, I got invited through Casey Reyes to do a group exhibition on Ferrophile with Tyler and a bunch of other plotter artists. And the group show was really focused on plotter art. And it was 30 pieces of art and 30 drawings. And that was like a huge aha moment because it's like, oh, okay. And I think that was one of the first times I really did like long form work, but it was kind of around the same time as like Hickett Nook, and I think there was a couple of weird experiments on that. But that was like the first time I was like, okay, like this is like a real deal professional thing here. Like the code can't suck, it can't break, like it's got to do something cool. I don't know what it's. I think that was actually curated, but like I was like, I need it to be good. So the project did really well. The group exhibition, like people were very stoked on it. The really amazing thing is every artist got every other artist's artwork. So I have like a watercolor from Licia He that I really cherish, that we just like exchanged, and like Iskra and Julian Gotchtel and Tyler. So we all got each other's work, and that was like reason enough to do it. So there was like this amazing community aspect. And the other thing is like we had these weekly group calls where we would kind of do critique sessions, like with fucking Casey Reyes, like hanging, talking, giving you feedback. So it was just like awesome. And then after that happened, I basically was just like, all right, I'm gonna just do like ArtBlocks curated, and had never talked to anybody at ArtBlocks or done really any like on-screen generative art ever. But I was like, I'm gonna do ArtBlocks curated, just watch. And I literally put that on Twitter. You can go look it up. And then I put my head down for a year and made Ori. So I'll stop there. But that's kind of
That's
like
amazing. Oh, dude, that's obviously a super exciting, I think, time in your life probably, and then your artistic kind of career. It seems like this is a bit of a pivotal moment. It sounds like, and so with Ferrophile, with that first, I guess that exhibition, so those were kind of hand selected digital works that were then translated to like on paper with the plotter. Is that kind of, am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the code lived as an NFT, and then there was a physical drawing made as well. So that was like, yeah, that was my first real taste. And well, I guess I should back up a little bit, because I had been making plot art and selling it on Etsy, and I ended up getting enough money from that to pay for my Axie draw. So just to like close the loop on that. So I had like some basic understanding of like logistics and fulfillment and all that kind of fun stuff. But when you have to make 30 drawings and people have expectations, it's like way more intense. So that was like with Ferrophile, yeah, it was like the dual component and then like the physical side of things. Like, and the other really cool thing about talking to this group of artists is we all shared our kind of like tricks of the trade for like packaging and all that kind of stuff and photography and all. So I learned so much during those times.
That must have been surreal for you, because I think what you like Casey reached out to you specifically
Yeah.
for this, or yeah, and during this time, were you had you like made up your mind that you wanted to do this full time, or was it still something that you were kind of exploring on the side?
So basically, being a professional digital artist never felt feasible to me. There was no real avenue to have like a reasonably like stable financial component to my life through digital art. So I always did it nights and weekends. I always like basically had this career in like kind of like the software engineering world, and art was always like my passion, my focus, but never really felt like I could like, make a career on it. And then around that time entered this like really intense phase of my life where it started to feel a little possible, but then like my career in software engineering was like elevating at the same time, and I was having a kid at the same time. So it was like literally impossible to do it all at the same time. So like my daughter was born like really kind of quite like a couple months before the Feral File drop. And I just remember like how hellacious it was trying to like do all these drawings and get them out the door, while also like being a new dad and then also like having all these like responsibilities at work. I was like, something has to give here. So I kept it going until like post Ori drop, and then I made the career change. But I'll just never forget, like I was speaking to people, I had like acquaintances who kind of knew what I did, but I was also really nervous about telling my coworkers that like my passion wasn't this job, it was like art, because it probably not be something that you want your boss to know, that you don't actually give a shit about like what you're doing necessarily. Like, I mean, I cared, but it wasn't like my passion. And I remember someone referring to my art as my side hustle once. And I was just like, that like strikes me the wrong way. Because I feel like this job is my side hustle. The art is what I want to be doing. It's just like, it's imbalanced now. And thankfully, I can say that that's no longer true. Like, art's the focus. My side hustle now is like making websites for the art. That's kind of a necessity, but I had to make that transition, and it wasn't an easy one. Like, it's really hard to walk away from a career that you built that for like 20, 15, 20 years, but it had to be done, because otherwise I can never like imagine giving the best of yourself for 8 hours a day and then being so tired and like worn out, and that's when your creative focus is and you're trying to solve all this like crazy math stuff. Like, that was like my day to day being a generative artist with full-time job. And it was like I'd like make little incremental changes throughout like a couple weeks or a couple months on one algorithm and get it to a place I liked. But I would like have to chip away at like little tiny specific things every single night, every single weekend. And now it's like the stuff I make, it's like I feel like in a couple of days I could just like knock something out that would have taken me a couple months. But also it's like, is that even art anymore? Or is it just like a study of like an algorithm? And now I feel like it's kind of just like different. It's like I'm just flowing, experimenting. I have all this energy. Like, I'm coming in here fresh. Like, so that is like the biggest change in my day to day, honestly.
Dude, that's fucking awesome. I'm super happy for you, man, and like congrats on taking that leap of faith. I can tell by the look on your face, this probably feels like it was the right decision.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Okay, so then after your first exhibition with Feral File, that's where you made the public commitment to becoming an ArtBlocks curated artist, and so you had the release of Ori. So, kind of like explain that kind of process of kind of like, where did the original idea come from, and what was that like working on the project, and just take me through kind of like the release of that collection, and then how that maybe opened up either kind of future opportunities, or how you kind of use that to then take that next step in your artistic career.
Actually, there was a microsite I made for Ori. You can go back and look. I did a progression of what the algorithm looked like, which is kind of fun. Because it started as just trying to fold paper algorithmically, taking, instead of a piece of paper, a piece of geometry, slicing it with a line and then folding it upon itself. And I realized if you did that, you could get interesting results. And you had a lot of variability. So like that originating shape could be maybe multiple shapes or different types of shapes. And those lines could go in different directions or maybe similar directions. The degree in which they're folded could be variable as well. So having a lot of fun with that. And then I started working on like texture work for how to make paper. And I'm not huge into like skeuomorphism in generative art, but I wanted something that looked a little bit like paper. And I think pretty quickly I realized it actually didn't look like paper, but it looked like another thing I really loved, which is spray paint and graffiti. So I was like, oh yeah, like let's do origami and graffiti mixed together. It's a really interesting thing to do digitally because it's like so not like one another in many ways. Like, origami is very precise. Like you follow directions to get specific results. Imperfection is usually going to lead down a path of just awfulness. But graffiti is like so freeform and it's so imperfect that the more kind of careless it looks in a sense, the better. Like the more effortless you make your work out to be, to me at least, like it's more aesthetically pleasing. So just trying to like put that all together. And computers are really good at both these things, being really precise, but also doing like randomized distributions of little tiny specks of paint. So just like bringing it together. So I got really intrigued by that. And I knew a little bit about origami, but I didn't know much about graffiti besides I liked it. So in the run up to Ori, I actually went out and I hung out with graffiti artists and got cans of spray paint and like visited like the most, and this is like kind of funny because in Vermont there's not much of it, but like the most prolific spots in Vermont to see graffiti. Because this isn't a city, like there's not a ton, but there is like underground culture here, and I, for one, love that. I love the like illegality of it. I love the kind of like creeping around at night. I love the like anonymous aspect of it. But I also love kind of like the prestige of doing things that are dangerous. Like there's a specific style of graffiti where people climb up really high on tops of buildings or bridges and spray paint in places that like are like inconceivable that people could even get there. So I loved that side of it, and I felt like it had teeth, and I like art that kind of has that. So I was just loving it. It was a good time. And I wanted to bring those things together. So I brought the project to ArtBlocks and I went through the process, found out it was going to be curated, which was like the best feeling ever at the time, just because the stakes were like super high to do it. And all the art on ArtBlocks curated has been amazing since like forever. So yeah, I mean, I was just like, I was super happy with it. And I really wanted to do things that hadn't been done before. And if you look at Ori, like the way I released it, it was a digital collection of 450 pieces. If you owned a piece, you could contact me and I would make a plot of that for you. But it was like a plotter specific rendition of the Ori algorithm that kind of gutted it and rewrote it. So it looked exactly the same geometrically, but it used only straight lines of different like variable like width spacing to like make the art. And basically, if you wanted that, I would give it to you. But then I had another version called the worked version, which is where I would do that. And you know, these would take like 8 hours with like the finest nib fountain pen that I had to draw. And then I would take it and I would throw ink all over it and splatter it kind of like that freeform graffiti style. And the ink would like oftentimes pull and bubble and like, you know, splatter. And like, there were some of like the funnest works to make just because I felt like I was like destructing the thing that was so perfect. So then I made those as well. And then, yeah, afterwards, like the project did really well. It minted out, thank God, and people really seemed to resonate with it. And then I don't know what happened. It's just kind of like, holy shit. I realized like I wanted to keep doing this sort of thing, and I couldn't keep doing it if I was still going to be a dad and have a job, and I was going to be a dad no matter what. So the job was kind of like on the chopping block. So dude, so I ended up leaving my job, and I'll tell you this story because it's kind of funny. I had been promoted a couple times in this time frame. So then at that point, I was managing like 9 or 10 people, and Ori came out. It was like in November, and basically, I didn't say shit to anybody at work about any of this again because of like conflict of interest type stuff. But like, it wasn't. I don't know. So I didn't say shit to anybody, and then yeah, a couple months passed, and I was like, I don't think I need this job right now. Like, I can't like retire by any means, but like if I can like sustain a portion of this for a while, like if I could just do that, like maybe I don't need this job. So like I was committed to quitting, but I had all this like responsibility and shit. So then like for better or for worse, the way I quit was I submitted my resignation letter and just was like, I'm quitting to be an artist. And people were like, what are you talking about? And then I like sent them the video that you had mentioned where like my artwork was in Times Square and stuff. And like a couple people got it, many others didn't. And at the time I was also super fascinated with like SP32 microcontrollers and like e-ink displays and all sorts of like interactive little gadgets and gizmos, like Adafruit type stuff. And like I love LinkedIn because it's like the most fakest place ever on the internet, like faker than Instagram. So I literally posted it on there, and I just took this little display, and I took a video where it just like lit up, and it's like after 18 years of my career in web development, then it started flashing all these colors, like I'm quitting to be a generative artist, and I feel kind of bad about this, but like some people, like the clients I worked with, and stuff didn't know about it, and they were like, "So does this mean you're like not going to be working at this company anymore?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it's been great ever since. But yes, I exited semi-gracefully from the career, started focusing on art full time, and what that started to look like was being serious about like what opportunities I wanted to pursue, and kind of just like saying no more than yes, and building out a studio in my house so that I could expand my capabilities as a plotter artist. And that led down the path of like basically, I live in a farmhouse from the 1800s, and the studio room I had was like so small that I could fit like a computer. I had a small Axie draw. I ended up buying a larger one, and it took up like literally like 50% of the room. So then I needed all these supplies and paper and inks and pens, and just like before I knew it, I was like mounting cabinets everywhere, just trying to like make it all fit. And then I sustained that for a while, and we can talk about it whenever you want. But I ended up moving out of there, well, renting a studio. I still live in my house, obviously, to expand the plotter biz for Busy.
That's amazing, man. You had a few other, like collections that you had released in between Ori. I know you did Runaway, which was an interesting release that you did with Highlight, I believe, and it was on Base, the Ethereum L2. So maybe how about you maybe talk about that and any other works that you were kind of doing in between Ori and Busy, and then we'll jump into Busy.
Yeah, so post job quitting, it was awesome because then I could like wake up and just focus on generative art, and I didn't have any commitments, and that's key. So I was like really able to just iterate. And one of the things I really started to focus on was this technique of like polygonal slicing. So taking a polygon and a multi-line and slicing the polygon with the multi-line. If you ever played, there's like Fruit Ninja or something like that, like a mobile game where you can like slice pieces of fruit. That's what they're doing. That's what I wanted to do. So I got to like take my practice and like boil it down to like these like components of generative design, of like taking kind of this primitive concept and then building up from there. And it's like I feel like every generative artist kind of has their bag of tricks, and that was certainly mine for that kind of stretch of a couple years. And you know, I really spent some time just focusing on that. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do with it. But Runaway was a bit of a spawn of that, as were many other projects during that time. And the other thing I did with Runaway is I really like this kind of like frosted glass. I think we're in the next couple days, because there's like the iPhone event coming up. We'll call it like the liquid display thing that they're doing, where like you're taking things and creating depth by blurring. So it looks like light is getting diffused through panes of glass. So I developed a solution to do that generatively. And just kind of putting it all together, I started seeing myself building another long form generative project with these techniques all together. And then I got approached by Highlight, who I really liked what they were doing, and I really liked the leadership there. To have an opportunity to do on-chain summer with Coinbase. And I was like, that sounds pretty cool. And they were like, this is going to get promoted on the Coinbase app, and they have like 80 million users. And I was like, that's awesome. And hey, like, I want to do my part to make sure that people are aware of generative art, because it is kind of still a niche thing in Web3 and especially in crypto. So it's like, what can I do to bring more collectors to the space? Like, what I can do is make art I think is great and get it in front of them and give them something interesting to look at and to learn about. So my goal with that really was just to onboard new people. And the way that they decided to do that was a really low cost mint that would hopefully have a lot of mints. And generative art is great for that because no one gets the same thing. Everyone gets a unique rendition of the algorithm. And you can play at that scale with scarcity in interesting ways. So Runaway was really about trying to make an algorithm that could be minted thousands of times and continuously offer surprises. So like really, really low chances of specific results occurring. And I had a lot of fun with that. I think it got minted out of like 4,700 unique mints. And there's like some little tiny subsets of the algorithm that have like 10 or 100 total. It's like, well, if people get those, maybe they can flip them or they can hold them and cherish them. I want to give them that chance to understand that feeling that others have gotten in the space. Then maybe they'll go buy some more generative art or look into it more or buy some of the other artists, like Mostly Redirect or Leander Herzog, who did On-Chain Summer with me, buy their art as well. So it was a really cool opportunity. I did get to like really watch as I had friends mint their first NFT and see that, it'd take them like 2.5 or 3 hours to figure out how to like step one, download Coinbase, link your bank, try to figure out how to get it in a wallet, do the transaction, where to go, I don't know, I need help. So it was like a lot of rigmarole, and it really taught me that like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to like make that more seamless. But I did convince some friends to buy NFTs for the first time because hey, it's $750. Like, check it out. Why not? So yeah, so it was a good time. And then after that, I got approached by Casey to do a follow-up on Ferrofile's first exhibition, which was called Minus Graph, and this one was going to be Plus Graph, and we're all coming back to do it again. So definitely decided drop everything, focus on that. Actually took that same technique of slicing polygons by multi-lines and extrapolated that into a plotter-specific artwork that did again have a digital component, but taking geometry and making it super orderly. So oftentimes making things like very perfect. And then one single line that's very playful that almost looks like a kid kind of took a pen and just like, jotted something or scribbled. And then having that kind of blow apart the geometry. So I had a lot of fun with that, trying to figure out how to make like really fun, curvy lines, and then just creating reactions from that on this orderly system and then drawing it. So that was another one where like that one I was way more prepared to deal with the fulfillment side of things because I had the experience and the time and kind of had more space. So again, creating 30 drawings, photographing them, boxing them up, shipping them out, like trying to do that while staying sane. And then after that, yeah, I mean, that was the last major project I did on my original AxiDraw. And the people who made the AxiDraw ended up coming out with a new version that was like twice as big. And I was like, of course I need to have that. So that's the AxiDraw A1. So I ended up buying one of them right after that project. That was kind of like my payday of like, or my treat after successfully doing the Ferrofile second exhibition was like getting a new machine. So I bought that and built a table for it.
Oh, that's awesome. So this time you didn't need to buy it and then commit yourself to selling a certain amount of prints to be able to pay it off. You actually were able to make the money first and then pay it off and not have to worry about it. I think that's great. And I guess then after that, So you got this new Axie Draw, and I guess the next release then was Busy. Is that right?
Yeah, but I did. So we did skip one major one because it wasn't a release necessarily. Like the other thing I've really found to be rewarding is doing in-person kind of engagements and events. And that summer I also did SIGGRAPH. So I went to SIGGRAPH, which is like the oldest and coolest like computer arts convention. And I think it was like the 50th year they were doing it. And I got connected with someone who was trying to fill a space there. So I took plotter art there and did interactive plotter art where I had multiple machines running and you could walk up and look at a screen and then you use a MIDI controller to like manipulate an algorithm and then press a button and then the plotter would just draw it for you. And that was like so sick because the people who go to these events are like people who work at like Pixar, the people who like invented the kind of things we use as generative artists all the time. Like for example, there's a booth that was like 100 feet away where Ken Perlin was at. So if you ever use Perlin noise, whether like you're an artist or like a 3D guy, like you probably used Perlin noise before. And the guy who invented it was like, he was over there. I was like, holy moly. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and it's something that you've done. It seems like a pretty good amount of times is like attended these different IRL exhibitions and have been able to showcase your work. So I think that's really amazing that you've had those opportunities, and I think the type of work that you do is probably a hit. You know, for people that are there, they're able to kind of interact with your work in a really tangible way. So that's awesome that yeah, you had that opportunity.
Yeah, it's like it's interesting because I wasn't really expecting the kind of feedback I got. So for one, people really liked it, and we ended up having to create like 230 drawings for people, and they all took like 10 to 20 minutes. So I actually had to like write algorithms that could be plotted really fast because there was a queue. Like we were only there for like 6 or 7 hours a day. It was 5 days. And it was like we could only do so many, and there'd be like a line of people trying to come and engage with the installation. And then some people would be like, "Plotters, I haven't seen one of these since the '80s." And I was like, "That's really funny." And then people were like, "I've never seen anything like this before. This is amazing." And I was like, "You should get one," especially because specifically SIGGRAPH, a lot of people are really technical. And there's a lot of really creative people. And I feel like it's such a good kind of Venn diagram of like the ideal plotter person because like there's a technical aspect and there's a really creative aspect. And like if you don't know about plotters, you don't realize like, hey, maybe you could like do that. So I'm telling you this because you said you don't have one, but you're interested in creative coding. So maybe get a plotter. You could get one from Bantam Tools. They're really fun. So
For sure,
anyway.
man. For sure. No, thanks for saying that. That's super cool, man. So then, why don't we then jump into your next, I guess, major long form collection that you released, which is Busy. And I know that it has roots actually to like years before. I think the part of the backstory is you have this series of tubes, plotter prints that you had released, I believe, back in 2020. So maybe share with us like kind of like the backstory behind both of those collections, I guess, and with the focus on Busy in particular.
Yeah, for sure. A series of tubes was a project I did. That was the one that was going to make my Etsy sales fly off. So I did a series of tubes. I put it on Etsy. I sold them for $135 a piece, and I sold probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them or something. Who knows? And that was enough to justify the AxiDraw purchase. But it was never really realized in a way that I wanted because it was kind of like these tubes. It looks just like Busy actually, but it's kind of restricted to, at the time, the machine I had because it could only do 11 by 17 drawings. So a series of tubes is kind of like restrained to that format. And I really love the project. And I like basically used a whole lot of kind of like haphazard coding to make these like little tubes that kind of float around a canvas and intersect and interact. And there's like different stages to the algorithm and how it gets like populated. So I had like all the bones for what I wanted in that algorithm, and it was really inefficient to write it because, like, for example, I was like taking the tubes and depending upon their direction, like actually rewriting the code as opposed to just transforming one kind of specific piece of geometry. I was like rewriting it, and that was kind of like a bad idea because it took like 4 times of like making a thing versus 1 time and then transforming it. So I learned a bunch of stuff in between then and then this point, which is like just the beginning of 2014, where I was like, okay, I have a new machine and I don't want to do any existing work on it. Like, I don't want to just take my old SVGs or algorithms and make them bigger and put them on here. I want to do something specifically made for this format. And now I know a lot more about creative coding and generative art, so I want to make something new. And I feel like I never really realized the full potential of the series of tubes series that I did. And when I was posting it, people were like, I love this. I want to own it. Can you make it bigger? And I was like, I will, no, I can't, not right now. So I got the new machine, and that's all it took was like, I'd known that there was interest in the algorithm to be bigger, and I knew that I would do it differently. So kind of busy started from that. So I already like, I knew how these systems were gonna work from the very first day that I like started coding, but I knew there was like more things I wanted to do that I just didn't know how to do before. So like with Busy, it works the same way in terms of like how the algorithm is built, but this time I wanted depth. So if you look at Busy very closely, there's like things that kind of rise up and are in front of other things. And with the series of tubes, that's not the case because in order to occlude 2 things on plotter art, like it's not trivial. So if you want things to overlap, with plotter art, you're just going to kind of see through. Everything's kind of like there's no fill involved. It's only a stroke. So it's like really hard to give that effect. And I had to invent that. So that was like another time in my career where I was like, let's get back to the basics here. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write like my own custom occlusion algorithm. And it took me probably like 2-3 weeks, especially with all the edge cases, to figure out like, how do I do this specific thing? And then from there, it like flourished. So I had kind of like the series of tubes, I had the occlusion thing all kind of baked into this engine. And then I was like, I don't want this to be purely abstract. Like I've done a lot of abstract generative art in my career, but I want to add something that is more figurative, that's recognizable to this. So it gives, plus it's more of a feeling that's kind of a lot easier for people to relate to as opposed to something that's like purely abstract. So I was like, I want it to be, and I think I arrived on the name Busy very early, but I was like, I want it to feel busy. What is busy? Busy is like a city, being in the middle of a city. It's like, there's so many things happening, so many things to look at. I want that in this algorithm. So then I figured out a way to do that. And unlike a lot of generative artists who are like kind of really focused on the code side of things, I was like so ready to escape the code side of things. And the way that I did that is I wanted to introduce the ability for me to do my own illustrations outside of code, outside of JavaScript, in Illustrator, and then export them and then import them into the algorithm. And if I could do that, that means I could like really create art that was done by hand or by mouse or trackpad or whatever you want to say, and get that kind of slurped up into a generative algorithm and then really let it play together. So I could like create these illustrations, and if I created this pipeline, then I could just keep making illustrations all day. And I ended up making like 100 illustrations and having them all be fed through this custom pipeline I developed. And then the code would pick them up and like manipulate them. So then there was like some bit of randomness and an interesting effect happening through the code. But let me tell you, it was really confusing to figure this out because it's like you have a folder of like 100 SVGs and it's like, well, JavaScript doesn't know how to take them, put them somewhere, and then like understand that occlusion side of things. So there was like all this custom work to like make it really seamless. Because for me as an artist, I want that ability to just like focus on just the illustration side of things and not have to worry about like what's going to happen when it gets implemented in the algorithm. I want to like separate them. So build that pipeline. And once I got that flowing well, then I was just like, I'm just going to keep doing this. And that added richness to the algorithm because I had so much diversity within the illustrations. And they started to feel like these kind of like simplified cities and buildings and that sort of things. And I was just kind of like developing my own illustration style for Busy specifically, which was new to me, which was a lot of fun. And then like, it was so weird because I would like draw these things and then they'd go into the algorithm and then they'd go to the pen plotter and they'd be drawn out again. So it was like this weird workflow of like, it's being drawn by me and then the machine, and then like how dense I was drawing things really started to impact like how the machine would draw them. Because if I drew a lot of really high detail windows, for example, the pen would just keep going in the same spot and rip right through the paper. So I had to like think about that on the digital side of things. But yeah, then I was like just kind of posting it without a destination. And I like working that way. I like making art without a plan and then figuring out where it fits best. And I decided to submit it to ArtBlocks Curated again, just to kind of see what would happen. And they were really stoked on it and decided to work with them because at that time they were like building out the curated program to be much more than just like a digital release. And I was really excited about that, especially because they were focusing a bit more on the physical side of generative art. And I feel like plotter art is like such a big part of that story. So it all kind of connected. But, you know, one of the things with ArtBlocks Curated that I really love about it is they have all these requirements that every project kind of has to fit within. So it kind of has to be deterministic. It has to be, you know, infinitely scalable. So in 500 years, when we look at all this work on like our million pixel wide monitors, like it's still going to look good. So like from the very beginning, all the curated projects have to like follow all these rules, and that's great, but it has to be on chain, and putting things on chain can get quite expensive. And Busy had all these illustrations, like 3 megabytes of illustrations, which 3 megabytes is like kind of a lot just for a website. But to go on chain, like in 2021, would have cost like $400,000. There's some stories out there of people spending hundreds of thousands of dollars just to put stuff on chain. And I was just like freaking out because I was like, I can't take all this out of this algorithm. Like it's what this algorithm is all about. It's like the coolest thing about it, in my opinion. So like it has to fit in there. So I was like, how do I solve this? Well, I can't just take like these SVGs and turn them into binary blobs and like superimpose them within the JavaScript. Like there's a lot of inefficiencies when you do that. So then I had to write this weird like transpiling step of taking these SVGs and like me, like idiot me figuring out how to distill them down to like the smallest possible combination of characters, and then making that into a package and putting that into the generative algorithm. So not only do you have to take it all, put it into the smallest bundle possible, then you have to like decompress it when someone looks at the artwork, and it has to look good, and it has to look exactly the same when they look at it as when I look at it, when I go to plot it, when it looks like that on paper. So it's like this really interesting problem just to try to like take something that I thought was going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and make it so I could afford to do that. And I'm happy to say that when I uploaded Busy, I can't remember how much it cost. It was like ridiculously cheap. It was like $150.
That's amazing. So I felt,
no one knows that story, but that was like one of my crowning achievements.
Oh man, that's amazing. That saved you a lot of money.
Yes.
You know, back in 2021, that was just a random transaction fee, you know, on Ethereum. Yeah. So that's pretty incredible, man. So then with Busy, so you had kind of the two different components. You had Busy, which was the collection of 50. That was the curated art blocks. And then you also had Busiest, right? Busiest? Yeah. So just explain that kind of sub collection as well. I don't know if you call it sub collection, but it's a separate collection under the Busy umbrella.
This is a cool story. So I feel like if you're going to commit to being an artist, you got to like swing for the fences. And Busiest was the result of me doing that. So I had become friends with the people who make these drawing robots over the years of just like ordering from them and asking them questions and trying to find all the weird little edge cases in their software. So I had to establish this relationship, and then like I think it was 2023, I went to their headquarters and went to Plotterfest, which was amazing because it was 40 plotter artists from around the world. And we just did like a 2-day intensive. So I was like, I literally walked up, met Bree Pettis, met the people who made the machines. And they were like, oh yeah, Zancan's sitting outside. I was like, fuck yeah. So chatting with Zancan, like, and just like everybody, like it was awesome. So I had established a relationship with them, and they were aware of the fact I was doing busy, and I was like, you know, it'd be really cool. Like, I'm kind of restricted to the dimensions of 34 by 22 on the biggest machine at the time that they were making, which is a great size. Like that's like a museum quality piece of art. It can be quite large. But it was like, I got swing for the fences on this. Like, what could we do? It was like, I'm not confident in building my own custom machine because typically when you do that, I feel like you spend a tremendous amount of time just finding pieces of like extruded aluminum that are straight and programming, and it's really slow. And just like, I was like, I want something that expert built. So I approached them and I was like, hey, you ever thought about building a really big plotter before? And they were like, yeah, actually, why? And I was like, because I would like to use one for this. And they were like, could you wait a month for us to build a prototype? And I was like, yeah, like definitely. So it was like this crazy last minute thing where I was like, Busy is a type of algorithm I wrote where I can set any scale to it. So it's actually kind of like measured by per square inch. So to make a busy in a different size or a different density is like no skin off my back. I built it that way because I like that kind of like control throughout the creation of the process to change things when I see an angle that I haven't seen before. So to create artwork of different scale with busy, no big deal on my end. The physical side of things is tremendously difficult because building like a professional quality pen plotter is no joke. So they were like, we'll build a prototype in a month. And I think that was like the summer, and everything was slated to go live like a couple months in the future from that moment. And I was like, if this is to work, as soon as they say the prototype is complete, I will drive down to their headquarters in Peekskill, New York. I will spend as much time as I possibly can there to validate that this is even possible before I sell this to anybody, because you can't sell people artwork that you don't know if you can make it. So I got the call, immediately drove down. Bree very kindly let me sleep at his guest house. And then I went into the Peekskill Bantam Tools headquarters every day. And they just built this super machine in like the back with like, I won't even get into all the details of how difficult this was, but like they built it, it was there. And I ended up being like, well, I don't even have paper of this scale. So like, what do you do? Like you have to order like rolls of paper. And I was so thankful that there was another artist there, this guy named Nima, who was like familiar with working at large scale when it comes to pen and ink drawings. And he kind of held my hand as like, I took this like $250 roll of like high quality archival paper, put it on the ground and started slicing and dicing it. He was like kind of showing me and holding my hand. So each piece of paper was like $50 worth of paper, which is very, very stressful. And this machine had never really been tested at this scale before. And it ended up working. And I was just like, this is awesome. Finally, I'm able to kind of like realize my vision for this art. Like I wanted it at this scale. And the first rendition of it, I was like, I'm just going to do a huge long portrait. Like, have you ever seen William Mapan has done this, where he's done like that Strands of Solitude project. Is like a huge kind of portrait style piece of art. I don't even know what the scale is, but it's tremendous and amazing. So like, I'll probably aim for something like that. And then someone was like, have you thought about making it landscape? Because like, you're going to be really tall to see top to bottom on this thing. And I was like, that's a great idea. A lot of times these ideas aren't my own. It's just like talking to others. And I was like, let's do that. Ended up plotting them out landscape, which is different than Busy's portrait. The coolest thing was like, I realized it was feasible, but each drawing was taking like 16 or 17 hours because they're pretty big. I think they're like 60 by 24. Really high detail, lots of different colored inks. And each pass was taking like 5 or 6 hours. So I didn't want to overstay my welcome in Bree's guest house. And I was like, okay, I know it works, but how am I going to get it done? He was like, well, you could borrow my minivan and take this machine back to Vermont for like a week or two if you want. And I was just like, it was like literally a nuclear bomb exploded in my head. I was just like, dude, that is like the nicest thing ever. And that guy is such a believer in plotter art and generative art that he would do that. And I was just like, I am like so thankful to you for this. So I ended up borrowing his minivan and driving it back to Vermont with this machine, this unwieldy, huge 72-inch, I think it's like actually 80 inches by 30 inches machine in the back. So it's like a piece of like plywood. It's not super heavy, thankfully, but it's massive. It wouldn't fit in the back of my car. Brought it back to Vermont in the middle of winter. It was like real snowy, I remember, and put it in my dining room because I didn't have any space. And my wife was cool with that. My cat was cool with that. My daughter was cool with that. And let it run all day, every day for a week straight and knocked out the 5 drawings. And then drove all the way back to Peekskill with the machine and then back to Vermont. This is like a 5-hour trip I've done so many times now. And yeah, knocked them out. Like, and then I could feel confident that like I could deliver upon the art as I sold it. And that was kind of the first phase of the Busy launch was Busiest, which was fixed price, which was kind of cool. So it was 5 fixed price. Then a little while after we did the auction on the 50 Busy drawings. And then actually there was a third phase which was just selling smaller prints of Busy, which I felt really strongly was valuable because again, people were engaging with the work, especially on Instagram, and oftentimes they weren't in the Web3 community or the generative art community, but it was another way to get people who had never seen anything like this before onto the ArtBlocks website, clicking around, looking at great generative art, and maybe we could convert some of them to collectors, which I feel strongly about. Like, we really need to grow the space, and the best way to do that I can think of is making great art and showing it to people. And it was just like another way to kind of get people's like foot in the door and hopefully give them some cool art. So we did that too.
Love that. And with those prints, so those are open edition prints. I think there's like 2 different editions.
Yeah, so the prints are really they're reproductions of one piece of art. So they're all of the same piece of art, and they're just like selections from the algorithm that I liked, messing around with colors, that sort of thing.
Cool. So then you have the 2, and those are still for sale, and those are like, I guess like $200.
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great, man. And you then had kind of like this this live exhibition that was happening during Marfa weekend last year. So what was that experience like? Like my girlfriend and I remember we walked into the Marfa house and you just had this, this print with the plotter that was just going to work. And it was a super cool experience kind of walking in. I know that you kind of like showed us around and were explaining the works, and that was a super memorable moment for us. So that must have been a amazing experience for you, I'm sure.
It was, just to share it with the community. It was. I mean, I am like still continuously just like drawn in whenever a Busy is being plotted. Like I'll just sit and I'll watch it, and I feel like that effect is like not just me; it's most people. Where there's really fun to watch the creation aspect of that. So I wanted to share that with other people, and I also realized I had that pipeline of creating illustrations, the generative algorithm, using them in different ways. So I was like, what if I swap out these illustrations with other illustrations? What if these illustrations have different meanings? And for Marfa, I ended up like really, it was a big commitment to draw like all these different landmarks within this little tiny desert town and then pipe them into the algorithm. And then I had like a Busy in Marfa. So it was like super meaningful for me because I loved Marfa. It's been such an important place in my career to go to time after time. And I just wanted to kind of like appreciate that and create art based on that. So I ended up drawing all these landmarks, like many of which I had to like refer to on Google Maps. And, Busy is kind of like, it's not top down, but it does have some sort of like orthographic perspective. And I tell you this because you kind of need to know what the top of things looks like if you're not just imagining them. So everything I drew in Marfa, I had to kind of understand like what the front of the buildings looked like and then the tops too. And oftentimes I didn't know, so I had to guess, which is kind of fun. So I ended up making Busy in Marfa, and that was just sampling all these different iconic places in and around the town, and then making a specific cut of the algorithm that is like that. And then I realized like Marfa's not really busy at all. You'd think you'd immediately realize that. It took me a long time to realize that. So I was like, what am I going to do? So I ended up like diluting the complexity of the algorithm by adding in a bunch of spacing. And Marfa is this little town and it's surrounded by ranches and fields and this sort of thing and desert. So I added that into the algorithm and it started to feel a little bit more like it made sense. And I'm like, I'm really happy the way it turned out because like that was the big insight is like, okay, break it all up and add this like spacing. And then it all started to make more sense to me. Um, so then I spent a couple months before Marfa just really focusing on that. And then I ended up borrowing DCA, your recent guest, his pen plotter. He's another awesome guy, really, really helpful and amazing. Borrowing his pen plotter and bringing down all my gear and just live plotting these drawings in Marfa. And I ended up consulting a few folks, and people were like, people might want to buy this. And I was like, yeah, you think so, huh? Okay, like that's awesome. Wouldn't expect that because it's like a big piece of art, but whatever, like cool. They were like, just think about what price you want to ask for. And I was like, okay. Eric actually told me that. And then I did do private sales there. And that was like a really awesome kind of thing to do before a curated release where it's like, okay, like I can gauge there's some interest in the acquisition of this work. And I really was like, but this is meaningful to Marfa. So I'm going to lock it down. Like, if you want to acquire this work, you had to have asked me about it. We had to have made that connection in Marfa. And if you didn't, sorry, like, it's done. It's never happening again. And then anything I had left over, I actually burned behind the ArtBlocks house there, and then sold the work to the people who wanted it, and that was that. But it was fun to do something like that, where it's just like it had to happen in the moment, and then just to like show off the process to people, get people stoked on it. Talk about my favorite thing ever, which is fountain pens and different papers and art supplies and all that kind of cool stuff.
I'm sure there was a lot of people that were nerding out with you on that. Everything about that release was so well done, except for maybe the physical burning of that beautiful plotter print that you had. That was insane. I think I was like probably hungover in the morning. Was a Sunday. I think it was on Sunday. Everybody's leaving and you're sitting there in the backyard just burning this beautiful plotter print. I'm like, is this real life? Like, what the hell is James doing? He's lost it, man. But that was a really cool experience. And also something else that you did too, you had like this grid of, I don't know how big the grid was, but people could go in and they could write their name in one of the squares on the grid and physically on the wall, and you randomly selected, I think it was 4 people that could walk away with a free busy print, I believe. So that was another amazing component to this this exhibition at the ArtBlocks house. So I think that was a really nice touch. I was like so convinced that I was going to win one somehow, and I don't know why I was so shocked. There was like, probably 100 people that had written their name in that grid, but yeah, man, just kudos to you and well done on that. That was just,
thank you.
It's probably my favorite release that you've done so far, and I think the Marfa specific outputs that you created was a really nice touch. The one that always comes to mind for me is the water tower, Marfa water tower. That was a really cool one. And I remember you also had like these cameras, I think, that were also kind of like one of the, what do you call it, sprite, that you kind of one of the objects in there. I thought that was a really cool feature as well. And I guess it was during that Marfa experience I learned a little bit about your interest and experience in photography too.
Yeah, so I have done a lot of film photography, and the cameras in Busy are like the Canon P, which is like I think from the 1960s. It's super cool rangefinder. It's like the poor man's Leica. It's the Leica I could afford because I could buy it on eBay for like $200. So I had a rendition of one of those in the algorithm that could potentially occur, but it was exclusively either that or there was a second version, which was like a Canon AE1P, which is like my favorite film camera for a long time, that may also appear, but they could never both appear, which is kind of fun.
Dude, do you remember that like when we decided to it was like a storm was coming in, and we decided to just go on a drive and just take some photos. And we drove out like south of Marfa, and just kind of like a really beautiful spot. You got some good photos. I saw that I think you shared one of those photos on your website, and we just had a really cool moment. And then on our drive back, we had some trouble getting back into Marfa, and as the border patrol or whatever, they required us to pull over in the car, and then they asked us to get out of the car, and they had like their canines sniffing around and making sure everything was okay. So that was a little bit scary, but yeah, a pretty interesting moment. So note to self, I'm gonna kind of stay within the perimeter of Marfa this year, and watch out if James asks you ever to go out shooting photos. He might take you to some areas that you don't want to go. But that was a fun experience, man. So
well, the funniest thing about that was the reason why we got stopped was run-of-the-mill border patrol, whatever, but the dog alerted. So it was like a drug dog. And the reason why the dog alerted is because Anthony, aka Mount Vitruvius, was like super into getting all the beef jerky he could possibly acquire in Texas. And he's so nice and giving. He gave me a bag of beef jerky, and we were eating it, or at least I was, and the car smelled like beef jerky, and it made the drug dog alert, and then it put up all these red flags and all this shit.
I forgot about that. You know what? That beef jerky is pretty much drugs, to be honest. So I'm not that surprised. True. That's hilarious, man. Oh man, crazy. So yeah, man. So Marfa this year. So you're gonna be there this year, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
How many years have you been there?
This will be my 3rd year.
Cool. Yeah. Same with me and my girlfriend. I've asked every guest so far about Marfa. Like what does Marfa mean to you, basically, I guess, as an artist and as a community member and someone who's gone now a few times. Like what is the draw for you, and why do you keep going back? It's one hell of a journey to get out there, so curious to hear your thoughts.
It's the annual meeting of the tribe. I think so often on the day-to-day, it's me in my art studio, and it can be a little isolating, especially just because there's not a lot of people who understand like what I'm trying to accomplish. I try to do a lot of like local arts events, and it usually requires a pretty long explanation as to like what the point is and what the robot's doing and what I'm doing. So I have to educate people to get kind of on the same page with them. But at Marfa, everyone kind of gets it. And I get to talk to people who blow my mind every year. Like, it's worth the price of admission for that alone. Like, going back actually to DCA again, one of my fondest memories last year was just sitting down with him and talking through like how he approaches writing these like really obscure, esoteric, like stitching algorithms. And then I was kind of explaining a little bit about how I approach certain things, and like, we were just going back and forth. I was like, dude, this is like worth $1 million right now. Like, I can't believe we get to like have this conversation. It's just like that again and again. And it's like people from around the world attend there, and people like that, again, make that crazy journey that you get to just kind of connect with. And my favorite moments are kind of like, not the like really busy nightlife type moments, but like when you get to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody that's just like, you kind of step away for a minute and you get to kind of hear their perspective and that sort of thing. That to me is like what it's all about. And I think a lot of people, like, it draws more people every year because of that. It's kind of like this hidden gem becoming a little bit less hidden, you know?
Yeah, it's such an amazing time going there. I thought that after making the journey in 2023 for the first time for me and my girlfriend, I thought, okay, like we'll probably make the trek out there, and then, you know, maybe we'll take a few years off and we'll kind of come back maybe in like 2026 or something like that. And when we came back, we both were like, we have to do this like every single year. Like, there's almost like nothing that is going to be higher priority than going to the Marfa annual meetup. So it'll be interesting to see how how things change, or if that can kind of that purity and kind of like that small tight-knit community feel, if that will be able to kind of sustain in the years to come. So But I 100% agree with everything that you said. It's well worth the admission fee, which is just many hours of travel and gas or the flights, and I mean it requires both typically.
You just recently went to Istanbul to showcase your busy collection. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? That looked like it was a pretty amazing opportunity for you.
Yeah, so this opportunity actually came just out of the blue. I got contacted to just basically do plotter art in Istanbul. And that was kind of the dream in some sense for Busy, was to be able to like map it onto different places like I had done with Marfa. And Istanbul was like the biggest kind of challenge in a sense for a lot of ways because it's really far away. It's not easy to get to, and it's not somewhere where you can ship things. So it's around the world, and to get a pen plotter there is extremely expensive. And like the people who make the pen plotters don't even ship them there because the Turkish mail service like sucks and they like lose stuff constantly. I'm only telling you this because I signed on to do it and had to come up with a logistics plan to make it happen that involved like this really convoluted process of like packing up a machine, and the box is enormous, and bringing it on the plane across the world, which was like insane because I actually drove from Vermont to JFK to fly to Istanbul with the pen plotter, had to like get to Turkish Airlines like at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they like almost didn't take it, but I think there was an oversight, and they were like, it's just oversized luggage, like literally in front of a sign that said you cannot bring boxes on this airline, it has to be luggage. And they just like didn't see that and they let it slide. So then before I knew it, I was like bringing the pen plotter over to Istanbul, and I had this plan of like, I don't want to have to bring it back. So I needed to find someone in Istanbul who was interested in buying this fucking pen plotter. And there was one guy, there was someone who really wanted an Draw, and they just couldn't get one because they weren't shipping them there. So I was able to like actually provide this like artist with the ability to acquire this machine that will hopefully help out his art practice in a way that's going to be like revolutionary, like it was for me, that enabled me to make Busy. So like that alone was like worth the whole trip because he came, I think he traveled like 5 hours to come to Istanbul at the end of this festival, and he bought the machine, and he was just like, he was so excited, and I was so excited. I was like, this is what I made Busy on. I'm passing it on to you now, like go do great things with it. And from what I've seen, like he brought it back and like built a custom table that is like 10,000 times better than anything I've ever built. Like top of the line table for the pen plotter. Like what's he going to do next? I don't know. So that was just like getting there. And then I ended up going for 10 days, and it was a 5-day digital art festival, and not at all related to Web3, not at all related to generative art. And it was like really interesting because it was a complete cultural change for me as well, just to be in Istanbul, and completely different, amazing city. And I tried to sample some of that in the artwork. So what I did is just try to identify like cultural landmarks. And the interesting thing about Turkey as well is it's changing really quickly. And there's a lot of like construction that a lot of the people don't like. So trying to be selective about what I added into the art without ever being there, without ever really seeing the culture, but just inferring it from what I could find online in documentaries and that sort of thing, just to try to make like something that felt reasonably authentic and hit the mark, as opposed to like just drawing the biggest landmarks or like skyscrapers that people think are just like eyesores, but you wouldn't know that if you didn't go there and talk to them. I kind of lucked out for the most part on that, but there were definitely some things that I experienced there that I just didn't even know about. So, for example, when you go to Istanbul, probably the first thing you're going to notice is that no one owns cats there, but there's cats everywhere because they're like free roaming, like feline paradise where like they don't live in people's houses. They live on the streets, and people build like cat houses for them. And down any street, I guarantee you, you'll see at least like 5 cats just chilling or playing or eating. And people put out food for them and water for them and stuff. And I had no idea that that was like an aspect of Istanbul. So after I was there for a couple of days, I ended up incorporating a cat into the busy algorithms. There's just like a cat floating within the like chaos of it all. And then just drawing like some of the architectural like landmarks there. Like for example, the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia, which was really cool because I got to like draw it from a distance and then go there and see it. And I didn't realize that this building was built like I think in the year 300. And upon its construction back then, it was the biggest building in the world. Like what? And it was the first time they'd ever done this thing with like the geometry of a building that involved all these different circles and spheres and like stacking them in a way that is like, I mean, it's a massive complex that's a mosque that is like architecturally really interesting. And it's also like almost like 2000 years old. So just being able to do that and like incorporate that and learn about it and go there and see it was super cool. And then the arts festival was like I think around 90 artists, 30 of which were in attendance, and there was like two other Americans. So it was like really cool. I was able to actually sync up with Alexandra Jovanik, who lives in Serbia, and she was a part of both of the Ferrophile exhibitions I had done. And we had known each other for years, but never met in real life. She's never been to Marfa or anything like that, but she came from Serbia and we got to hang, and she did an installation as well, which is like super cool. So I like knew her. Got to meet Jonathan Monahan, who's like a fine artist who really focuses on 3D, and just chit chat with him and learn about his process. And he was telling me about how he was using like CNC mills to cut marble to make sculptures based on his 3D work. And it's like that's all one thing, but you got to like polish it by hand for like 4 months after you do that. Amazing. And then beyond the artists, it was open to the general public, which is kind of new to me because Marfa, it's really kind of like endemic to generative art, and SIGGRAPH was kind of like a paid entry thing of the conference. This was open to the public. So really next to nobody knew what was happening with my installation upon first glance. So they were able to come and ask questions. And the Turkish people are amazing. They're the friendliest people I've ever met anywhere. A lot of them spoke some English and were just like so curious. Like the thing that I learned that really like I didn't consider was like kids were in attendance, and kids are kind of like an X factor when you're doing an installation because kids touch stuff. So a plotter, you really don't want to touch it, especially not a busy because it's so precise. And kids come up and they touch the table and they rock it. And then like I had part of it where I was doing drawings every day and putting them on a wall. And kids would come up and they would just like touch it, touch the work. And dude, I was like losing my mind because like at one point some kid came up and they just took their fingers and streaked it down one of the
No.
raw drawings.
Oh my God.
And it was just like, okay, lesson learned there. But then other kids came up and they were just like so fascinated with the process and like inspired by it and curious about like just the pens. And I had some really cheap fountain pens, and like I was like, how about I give you one of these and why don't you make some art with it? And the kids are just like amazing. And then like the one kid came up 5 minutes later and he's like in broken English, he's like, I need ink. And I was like, do you have something to put it in? And he was like, I'll be right back. And he came back 5 minutes later with just a water bottle. And I was like, you know what, kiddo? Here's some like of my favorite, like Pilot Irashijiku, amazing quality fountain pen ink. I'm just gonna give you a bunch in this water bottle right now. Go about your way and figure it out. And like he was like so stoked on it. I was like, he'll come up with something. And then the other thing is like in Turkey, like this was again, it was a digital art festival, so it was a lot of screen-based work, and there wasn't much happening in the physical space beyond screen work. So it was cool to be a part of that. Because it was like this installation that was like a probably 70-foot tall, like crazy grid of LED screens to do like these massive kind of Refik Anadol style like 3D visualizations. And then it was like the pen plotter. So it's cool to see them like side by side. I feel like visitors got to see digital art in many different ways, which that was kind of my goal, is like, I want to show you digital art that's on a piece of paper, which is kind of like unusual, especially in that space.
That's so cool, man. Wow. What a great experience. Is there any other exhibitions that you have planned for the rest of this year or next year?
Not at the moment, actually. Like the focus is definitely production of busy. I'm open to anything, but I've kind of on purpose been like steering clear of commitments to finish this. But if there's any listeners doing anything interesting, let me know. Yeah.
So I've seen recently on your Instagram in particular, you've been releasing some pretty interesting videos of some stop motion work. What's going on with that? What's the backstory and like where are you planning to take that work, I guess? Like
Yeah, no, for sure. I would say there's a couple of other plotter artists who've done some stop motions that I've seen over the years. And there's a really good reason, I think, for doing stop motions in this way, because pen plotters are really good at drawing things exactly as how you want them. So for a stop motion, you kind of can create exactly what you want. And via code, you can just like manipulate parameters and make things change over time. So you can change things over time and you can replicate them physically with high fidelity. And that's a really good way to do a stop motion. So I just want to kind of like try that. And I'm really curious about using plotters in unusual ways. So I also did like a foray into screen printing recently where I was like doing this process of pen plotting positives and then burning them onto screens and then doing screen prints. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with screen printing you can't do with pens. Like you can do like fades and really thick lines and fills and all this cool stuff. So to bring it back to stop motion, to answer your question, it's just like, what can I do with pen plotters that goes beyond just like a single piece of artwork on a piece of paper? And that was just like a way to try that out. And I want to do more of that. It's just like the process is, again, it's kind of like baking where you have to go through a lot of steps and it takes a lot of time. So some of these stop motions, like I've come to learn that stop motions, modern stop motions are at like 24 FPS. So if you want 1 second of footage, you need 24 frames. And if your stop motion has a lot of stuff going on, each frame might take a while to draw. And you also have to draw a lot of frames to make, say, a 10-second animation. And each frame needs to be cut out and hopefully is going to be the same size as its like siblings, and then also photographed again. Like, and if you want to do all that, like it's a lot, but I kind of love it because there's been a couple of nights in the studio where it's like, okay, like all the frames, like I'll draw, like I actually developed the whole fucking way to like draw a bunch of frames on one piece of paper and then flip it over and draw all their numbers on the back so that I don't lose the order of the frames, because that's like a disastrous scenario with stop motion. But like once I get it so like all the pages are completed, it's like I could go home right now or I could stay here until 11 p.m. like cutting them all out. And then once you cut them all out, it's like impossible not to want to just like set up lighting and shoot all the photos. And then like once you do that, it's like impossible not to import them all and see what it's going to look like on your computer. So like it's just like this spiral that kind of takes hold of me. But it's like it's a lot. So I try to like pepper it in whenever I have like a free moment of like I feel like committing to doing stop motions this weekend or whatever. I'll like start to think about what I want to do. But yeah, lots of work. The payoff is oftentimes just a couple seconds of footage, but it's a lot of fun. It's just cool to see something different, you know, and I just want to keep doing them. I don't really have a plan for what I'm going to do with them, but I'm just going to keep making them.
super cool, man. I love that. It's really interesting work. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what you got in store next for that.
So I know also something that you did last year was you spoke at Marfa. You gave a presentation, I believe, and in the last year or so as well, maybe it was over a year ago. You also spoke at Station 3 in New York City, which was a panel discussion in partnership with Sotheby's, I believe. And so I see, there's a bit of a theme that you've been speaking to a little bit in this conversation about education, I think, and about kind of sharing your perspective and helping people maybe see the things that you see. And I'm just kind of curious about, is kind of like education or mentorship, is that kind of like something that's important to you at all, or that you see yourself having a role to play when it comes to whether it's onboarding people into the long form generative art space or just helping to inspire people based on the types of work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just trying to give back in a sense because that's kind of like how I got started is I just found a couple of people to follow who had done that in the past, and watched videos on it and just like people just do it because they care about it, you know? Like if you go watch like the coding train on YouTube, Daniel Schiffman just like makes hundreds of videos on all these little tiny like amazing techniques for making generative art or just whatever you want to do with it. I just like I don't know exactly why he does that, but he does it and he's really passionate about it. And he's like, to me, that is like a great role model, for someone to be like that. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's always cool, and also public speaking is not my strong suit. So I feel like as an artist, like you got to really embrace being uncomfortable, and that's one of the things that like I'm really uncomfortable doing. And I feel like whenever I get the opportunity, I like really try to commit to making it happen, even if I don't like it at the in the moment or whatever. Just because, yeah, I don't know. If I want to be comfortable, I just go work a 9 to 5 at some company.
There you go, man. Um, it's that's interesting though because you seem like you're like very well spoken and you're very knowledgeable about the space and everything that you do. So I feel like it probably comes natural to you. But I think that a lot of people we can be our own kind of worst critic. You know what I mean, and that kind of stuff. I think public speaking is something that's difficult for a lot of people, myself included. Truly, truly. But what were those experiences like for you? I mean, speaking at, kind of, you've talked about the exhibition with ArtBlocks and you've done some other exhibitions, but I mean, giving a presentation during Marfa weekend and then also like the panel discussion at Station 3, like what were those experiences like?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, nerve-wracking would be the first way I describe them. But really rewarding. I mean, I definitely think if you have to explain things to people, it makes you understand them better. Putting together a presentation about kind of what Busy is and how it came to be and why it is the way it is, like that solidified a lot of ideas for me. And I think it was a great way to run up to actually launching the project. And I ended up also just writing it all out and putting it on my website. And that helped too, actually. Because otherwise, like I'm liable to forget some of that stuff in like 5 years. So I kind of like just documenting that in different ways. And then if you're documenting it, why not do it in a way where you can share it with people? And whether that's posting it online or talking to them about it, like I think that's all really valuable, and it's time well spent, if nothing more than just for looking back on in the future. And with the Station 3 thing, like, I mean, it was just cool to like to understand a little bit of the perspective of like that side of things, which is kind of like, you know, the commercial side of art sales, that sort of thing with Sotheby's and where they're coming from, what they think about, how they think about generative art, and provide a little bit of like my perspective on why I really love it and why I think it's different than any other art form. And really what it comes down to is just that infinite possibilities aspect. So being able to write a program that produce something different for the rest of our lives, like that to me is unlike anything else. And I think that's really a fun tool for an artist to play with, and just kind of like just ping that off to other people and seeing what they think about that. You know, maybe it's not valuable to them at all, but I'm curious as to why. And yeah, I think, you know, to me, having those conversations are really important just to broaden my understanding of what I'm doing.
For sure, man. I had Harvey on like, 2 guests ago on the podcast. And he had mentioned that he after the release of Photon Stream, which is his first ArtBlocks release, he began to look more at it, kind of gave a little bit more attention to what other long form generative collections had been released prior to his release, and had found some level of, like, you could say, success and whatever that means. But he started to try to learn a little bit from what other artists were doing that he felt like to him was a successful drop and something that an artist, could be proud of releasing, let's say. And he was trying to understand a little bit too, like kind of like the market in a certain sense. And I'm kind of curious, like when you're creating works, when you're coming up with an idea and you're like working through the algorithm and all of these things, are you doing that with any consideration for quote unquote the market, or is it something that you don't really give much attention to?
I think it depends. I mean, like with the project we spoke about with Runaway, like it's definitely tuned towards like market demands so that like again there would be like great diversity throughout the collection and there'd be lots of rarity. So if it's something like that, sure, but for the most part, no, not really. Like I like to think a lot about how when I launch a project, how it's going to be perceived and give people that data. Like having a really good, compelling video is like a bare minimum to me, but also like branding the project, writing about the project, talking about it, like just giving people more information than they asked for and showing them as opposed to just like when you're done with the code, the thing's over with, move on to the next. Like that's not my style at all. Like I find that I'll spend probably like 70 to 80% of the time actually developing the art, and then at least 20% of the time honing in its presentation and its kind of rollout campaign. And that's why I oftentimes find myself working with people like ArtBlocks because they provide a lot of leverage in terms of like having teams that can help you out with that sort of thing. So they did a great job with Busy, like building a web presence for it where you could like zoom in on the art and look closely. And, you know, this was the first time too that I hired out on some things in terms of like the video production specifically. Like I worked with a filmmaker local that like I wanted him to just like roll with it. So for one, I didn't have to like deal with it, but also because he's an expert and I'm not, and like I'd rather like get his side of things. And just like trusting others to do that sort of thing. But to me, it's like, I wouldn't say I look at other generative art projects and think like, oh, what are they doing right? In terms of like the market response and that sort of thing, or what they're trying to be or say. I have like looked under the hood and tried to understand how people craft algorithms, and actually is kind of like a side effect of just working on software engineering teams for so long, just doing like code reviews for so long, like reviewing generative code and trying to pull it apart and understand how it works. Because that's like one thing you definitely miss in this specific art world is like there's no one who's going to look at your code and give you feedback, and you're not going to look at anyone else's code and learn from them either. So you have to kind of like take the initiative to do that yourself. So I'll do that. I haven't in a while, but I used to just like look under the hood and see like what's happening, you know? But I actually think if there was like one specific genre or form of art that I look at like this whole like process of the creation of the work and then the release of it that resonates with me the most, it's actually musicians. It's not even visual artists. Like I'm more interested in like the fact that a musician spends all this time creating amazing music and then they like create an album that has a narrative and has artwork and a music video, and then they go on tour and they talk about it. Like that to me is like more of the full package that I'm trying to do, as opposed to, again, it's just like the art on the wall in the gallery with a little tiny tag next to it that says like what it's made with, and that's really it. That to me is like not enough for what I'm trying to do.
Cool, dude. That's interesting. That's an interesting kind of parallel that you're making. I also wanted to just mention that with the kind of the promotional video content that you do for your releases has been awesome. Like I remember when Ori was coming out, I remember getting so pumped, just like
Nice.
with the promotional video. I was just like, man, this is so cool. So yeah, I think that's you've done really really well. I think with those videos. So kind of a little bit of a side question based on this. So just speaking of ArtBlocks a little bit. So ArtBlocks, they've recently kind of announced their AB 500, where they're going to be capping off with the 500 total collections. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that as someone who's a curated ArtBlocks artist.
It's cool to be part of two of the 500. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in what comes next. I mean, the thing I really love about ArtBlocks is they've really stuck to their guns in terms of just doing long form generative art that is on chain. Like that to me is really compelling. because I think in the annals of history, they're going to be the place that people go to look at this moment in time, which I think is a really important aspect of like this generative art movement that's been going on for, you know, a really long time, since really like the 1960s. Like this era is going to be a big milestone, and ArtBlocks will be the place that will be looked at in terms of like a great repository of this moment in time. So like I think that's awesome. I think capping it, like to me, I think solidifies that. I don't know what's next. Like to me, I'd love to just see like awesome curated projects. Like for me, I'd like to see them every like 2 months come out. I feel like there's definitely has not been that much new art that I'm seeing, at least. I'm also not on Twitter really anymore. Um, but I want to see more awesome generative art. Like, let's fucking see the best thing ever. Like, it's not here yet. Like, I'm sure there's artists out there making something that is going to become like what we all admire and look at as the best art we've ever seen. Like, that's going to happen. I don't think it's happened so far. So I want to see more. I hope they put out more. Like, I think they're talking about, from my understanding at least, like more kind of experimental engagements and one-offs and that sort of thing. And that to me sounds exciting. But I don't know what's in store. Like, I think they're coming out with a new curated project soon. They said that, so I'm curious to see what it's going to be. But that's all I got, really.
For sure. No, cool. Yeah, very cool, cool take. And yeah, it's exciting times right now for sure. And there's been so many amazing works that have been released in the previous, however many years, 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been. But you're right, like we're kind of just scratching the surface in a sense, right? I mean, there's historical roots that go back many decades, but yeah, we're still kind of in the earlier years of kind of what will be most likely a very long, hopefully a long art movement moving forward. So I do think it's a special time right now, and I agree that kind of capping it off is kind of solidifying this chapter right now of explorations on chain, and ArtBlocks has really been kind of pioneering in a sense as kind of when it comes to this movement. So that's why I'm so proud to wear the squiggle hat every time I'm on the podcast here. So I guess kind of as a follow up, are there do you personally collect any art? And are there any artists that you that personally resonate with you, or like, do you have any favorite artists, I guess, or anyone that you look to, either the plotter art space or long form generative artists? Anyone that you're kind of a fan of?
Yeah, I mean, I do collect occasionally, and there's a lot of people, and it's a long list, but I really like I want to own some of like the physical stuff that Anna Lucia is doing. So I have like one of her more recent digital projects, but the embroidery side of like physical generative art is really intriguing to me. Um, Man, it's like there's definitely a lot of like up and coming plotter artists. There's like this like another generation that's like sprouting up right now that are doing interesting things. And I think what's really cool about them is like, for example, there's this guy, I think this is Pavlov Plus, but huge following on Instagram, no following on Web3 at all whatsoever. But he does plotter work, and he does a lot of really large format drawings. And he just did a collab with a clothing brand. So I collected his work through the clothing brand, which was like super stoked on. And every now and then I'll see like these interesting collaborations that are like plotter artists outside of this domain doing interesting things with brands that I like also really like. So that's like an instant buy for me. But in terms of like Web3, like huge fan of like exactly like the last curated before Busy, I was a huge fan of everything in that. So like Iskra, Lars Wander, Zach. So I grabbed a Lightbox Studies, which I was super excited about. I would have loved to grab one of Lars's like watercolors, but wasn't able to. And then beyond that, I mean, it's been a little slow recently, honestly. Like I said, it's like I'm waiting for the next big thing. But yeah, and I also like the really weird out off the wall stuff. So my favorite time collecting in Web3 was definitely like the Hicket Nook era and creating as well because I feel like it was a path just to put weird shit on the internet. And it felt like these early Newgrounds days where like the more obscure and outlandish the thing was, the better it would do, or the more I would appreciate it for sure. And I hope we get back to that. And I don't think the answer is like art coins or any of the other things happening. It's like I want that really free form, kind of like low risk, high experimentation side of things. And we're sadly missing that at the moment.
That's interesting. Yeah. Um, I think I agree with you on that. You know, what would you say is something that looking you're the most kind of optimistic about right now in our space, or something that you're looking forward to, like let's say in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we have a great foundation, I would say. So like to me, I think that's just going to continue to mature in terms of like the meaningful impact that the space has created in like the greater art world so quickly. So I think that will continue to kind of come up on its own. And then beyond that, um, I think there's still a lot to try that hasn't been tried before. Like I think that there's going to be a lot of evolution in generative art specifically because there's new technologies all the time. So like for me, I think of AI art as pretty much generative art, right? It's like a non-deterministic algorithm creating a visual output. To me, that puts it in the same category. It's new technology. And I think that that's not the last time we're going to see something else crop up that fits within that generative space. And there's always going to be that next thing, and it's probably going to be have more capabilities than at least what I'm familiar with, and that's okay. But for me, like I don't think we've even really reached like the limit at all whatsoever with what you can just do with JavaScript. Like the really, if you were to like find the most basic way to make generative art beyond just like the physical version of like the Solowit instructions, people follow them, random things occur. If we're talking about on the digital side of generative art, like the most basic format of that to me is probably just JavaScript or processing. And I feel like there's still a lot to explore there. So I think it's going to kind of continue to grow and there will be those divergences where new technologies come in. But there's going to be people doing really kick-ass awesome things with the existing tools we have already. And maybe they're going to do things that look like what we're doing now with new tools. And that's going to be exciting too. Like I'd love to see really great plotter art that's made in very extremely different ways, and who knows what's going to be, but I'm sure it'll come. So,
Would you say that that's something that you hope to kind of do yourself in the coming years? Is continue to kind of explore that further?
you know, because I've been through a couple of these phases, like we spoke of before, where it's like I will switch lanes throughout my career. Like I know that about myself. But I'm currently in this lane driving like 100 miles per hour, and I just can't see any other way to do it. And like I just know that maybe that won't always be the case. But I'm gonna like push this thing to the absolute limit. If I get bored making plotter art and writing JavaScript to do it, then yeah. Or there's something so fucking cool that catches my attention that I can't avoid it. Like I'll certainly do it, but I just can't see either of those things happening right now. And I'm not saying they won't, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, man. I mean, as you continue to develop, I think, your perspective can change and you can see new opportunities, and just to be open to that, I think is probably a good thing. So, it'll be interesting to see as your artistic practice continues to further develop, and yeah, we'll see what will be in store for your future artwork. So, I guess I just want to ask, like, like, are there any kind of perspectives that you have that you would want to kind of share with the community, either artists, collectors, builders in the space? Like, is there anything that really comes to mind?
I wouldn't put my opinions on others, honestly. I have the lessons I've learned, but I feel like they're so just like they're from my own experience and from my own mistakes that like I don't know that like it'd be relevant necessarily to be honest with you. Like I'm just doing things my own way. I don't know if it's the right way. Like, we talked about how I think about projects, how I think about the full package. Like that makes sense for me, but you could do it any other way. And I think that many people do and have much success doing it other ways. It's really just, I think about being real with like what you want and not trying to cater to what others want. Like that's it really. I mean, I try not to even think about what other people want, because the other thing that's happened a lot to me recently is like I've been getting more and more comments on Instagram that are just like haters, which is really amusing to me. But like there's so many people out there who just don't even like what I do and like don't like it enough that they just want to talk shit about it, which is like totally fine. And then there's other people who come in and then fight those people in the comments, which to me is just like mind blowing. So it's like if I actually cared what people thought, I would be like, like mired in all this. And it's just, you can't, for me at least, I can't really spend any time on that. It doesn't do me any good. So I just let it kind of fly.
I think I mean, that's great advice, man, especially if it allows you the peace of mind to be able to kind of focus on your craft and the things that you want to accomplish, I guess, with your day. I think that's a great thing, man. So you only have so much attention and so much time that you can devote in any given day. And it's so easy to let things kind of chip away at that. And, I applaud you on your ability to kind of stay focused and to just be giving your all at this moment in time with, what you're focused on. So you're doing some really fantastic work, man. And I'm happy to see kind of where you're at and to kind of understand your life journey a little bit more and your artistic journey. So good job, man. Keep it up. Keep it up. Don't let the haters fucking distract you, man.
Dude, I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Well, I guess why don't we kind of leave it at that? Thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate the time, and I think you've given a lot of like really, really great perspective. Is there any kind of final words and ways that people can contact you if they're looking to get a commissioned generative work or plotter print or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. No real final words. Thank you. I mean, it was really the big one. I really appreciate your time and your questions and your really thoughtful questions, honestly, because I'm a big fan of what you're doing here, and it's amazing to be a part of it. And I'm glad we got to talk about some of the stranger aspects of the life and times of James Merrill and the funny things I've been through to get where I'm at now. But yeah, I mean, I am wrapping up busy, but open to commissions, working on new work sooner rather than later. And follow me on the internet or reach out. Website's lostpixels.io. You can click on the contact form on there and it'll have some information about how to reach out to me.
Cool, man. Okay, man. Well, thanks so much for your time, dude. And I'll see you in Marfa soon, man.
Absolutely.
I can't wait, man. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, dude. And this time, hopefully, you won't end up sleeping on your couch for a night. Yeah. we got the proper dates booked this time in Marfa. So we're all learning from our mistakes in the past, I guess. So
awesome. It's gonna be a blast,
cool.
Man. I can't wait.
Can't wait, dude.
All right. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and give me a follow on Twitter at longformart. As mentioned, none of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment and information purposes only. More information can be found in the podcast episode description. And thanks so much for listening in. I'll be back soon with another episode.